Prince Harry walked onto Jimmy Kimmel's stage expecting a friendly interview, but within minutes the entire crowd went silent. What followed was a brutal confrontation that ended with security stepping in and Harry being forced off the set. This is the full, unfiltered breakdown. And if you want more raw, no-nonsense breakdowns like this, hit subscribe right now, you'll regret missing what's coming. Security moved in first. The crowd did not understand what they were seeing at all. Two guards stepped toward Prince Harry while the stage lights still burned bright, and the whole room froze. People stopped clapping. A few whispered in the dark like they were trying to check if this was part of the show, but nobody had a clear answer. Harry stood near the edge of the chair, breathing hard, and his face looked tight with frustration. Jimmy Kimmel stayed in his seat for a second, stunned, because even he could not process what just happened in front of him. Harry tried to talk to the producers off to the side, but the audience could not hear him. The cameras were already cutting to a wide shot, which meant someone in the control room had decided that they were not letting this meltdown go to air. One of the guards motioned for Harry to step back, and the tension was loud enough to feel in the pit of your stomach. People in the front row leaned away from the stage as if they were afraid the situation might explode into something bigger. Jimmy finally stood up, but his expression told the whole truth. This was not a joke, not a sketch, and not some planned publicity trick. He looked worried, not amused. He looked like a man who had completely lost control of his own show. Harry shook his head and tried to speak again, but the guards guided him toward the curtain. The room went silent. No one even tried to clap. Everyone was too busy trying to understand why one of the most famous guests the show ever booked was being taken off the stage like a troublemaker. The second Harry disappeared behind the curtain, Jimmy turned back toward the audience, and the fear in his eyes made it clear that something serious had happened. Viewers at home would only see a cut to commercial, but inside that studio, everyone knew the night had taken a hard turn. This was the moment when everything fell apart and nothing about it felt scripted. Prince Harry had been sitting in the center of headlines for weeks. Every time he tried to stay out of the spotlight, something new pulled him straight back in. There were interviews where he spoke openly about his family, and there were public disagreements about projects that did not land well. People argued about his choices nonstop, and the noise around his name kept getting louder. It was the exact kind of moment late-night shows loved, because bringing him on guaranteed attention. Jimmy Kimmel booked him for one simple reason. A guest like Harry brings viewers, and viewers bring ratings. It was supposed to be a friendly conversation that touched on recent stories without pushing too hard. Jimmy knew how to keep things light, and his team expected Harry to play along. The show wanted a mix of curiosity, laughs, and a small spark of drama. Nothing more than that. They prepared jokes, they wrote questions, and they tried to read the room before deciding how far to go. The problem started before Harry even walked onto the stage. People behind the scenes said he arrived tired and annoyed. He had asked for certain topics to be avoided, and he pushed back on some of the jokes planned for the opening bit. The writers did not love that because the show runs on humor, not restrictions. Jimmy tried to be patient with the requests, but he also wanted the interview to feel natural. That balance was already shaking before a single camera turned on. By the time Harry took his seat, both sides were stiff. The audience could not see it, but the energy was heavy. It felt like one wrong question could tilt the whole thing in the wrong direction. No one expected the night to explode the way it did, but the warning signs were already there. If you are still here, hit subscribe. Do not half-watch this like the people who leave early. You are clearly smarter than that. The tension started long before the cameras rolled. People on the crew said they could sense Harry's mood as soon as he arrived. He walked into the building with a tight expression, and he kept his answers short when staff tried to guide him through the schedule. He was polite, but he did not look relaxed. It was clear that he wanted the interview to stay controlled, and that kind of energy always puts pressure on a live production. Inside the writer's room, frustration was growing. Jimmy's team had worked on the monologue and the opening bits all day, and they planned a few light jokes about Harry's recent headlines. Nothing harsh, just the kind of playful teasing that every celebrity deals with on late-night television. Harry pushed back on those jokes during the pre-show meeting. He asked them to remove anything that mentioned his family. He also asked them to cut a sketch that was meant to poke fun at his media attention. The writers had to rework the script at the last minute, and that always creates stress because timing and flow matter for a show like this. The green room was not calm either. Harry asked for space, so producers kept their distance, but they could hear the tension through the door. Harry spoke quietly with his team and the tone sounded sharp. He kept adjusting what he was willing to talk about. Each change forced the producers to adjust their plan again. Meanwhile, the clock kept moving closer to showtime. When Jimmy stopped by to greet him, the interaction did not ease the tension. Harry answered politely, but he looked on edge. He made it clear that he did not want any jokes that he saw as cheap shots. He also said he would not play along with any bits that made him feel like a punchline. Jimmy tried to smooth things over, but both of them walked away knowing the interview might be harder than expected. By the time the stage manager called for everyone to get in place, the air behind the scenes felt heavy. People traded looks that said they hoped the live audience would lift the mood. Instead, the pressure followed Harry right out onto the stage, and it sat there with him the entire night. The interview began with the usual applause, but something about the energy felt slightly off. Jimmy welcomed Harry with a smile, and Harry smiled back, but it looked tight. Jimmy tried to warm up the room with a simple joke about how Harry had probably done more interviews in the past month than most people do in a lifetime. It was meant to be harmless, but Harry barely reacted. He gave a small smile that looked more like effort than amusement. The audience laughed, but the laugh sounded unsure, like they were trying to figure out if they were supposed to enjoy the moment or stay cautious. Jimmy kept the tone light because that is what he always does. He tried another line, this time about how Harry must be getting tired of talking about his book. Harry nodded and gave a short answer that did not carry much warmth. The room could feel it. People in the front rows shifted in their seats, sensing the strange tension between the two men. The show had barely started and the chemistry already felt shaky. Then came the moment that pushed things forward. Jimmy leaned back and said in a playful tone that Harry must be happy to take a break from drama for at least 5 minutes. The line was delivered with sarcasm, but still in the style Jimmy uses with every guest. The audience laughed, but not all at once. It sounded scattered. Harry did not laugh. His expression changed for a second, and anyone paying attention could see it. He felt the sting. From Harry's point of view, it felt like a shot at everything he had asked the producers to avoid. He had already made it clear that he did not want jokes that made him look like the center of chaos. So when Jimmy slipped that line in, Harry saw it as disrespect. It felt like the show was ignoring his boundaries, and it set off a spark inside him. He tried to brush it off with a small nod, but his eyes told a different story. The audience was caught between laughing and staying quiet. They sensed that something was wrong even if they could not explain it yet. The interview had only been going for a few minutes, but the tension that started backstage had now settled right on the set, and everyone felt it grow with each passing second. The turning point came faster than anyone expected. Jimmy leaned forward with his note cards and asked a question that he believed was fair. He said that many people were confused about Harry's recent comments on privacy, and he asked how Harry balanced his public work with his desire for personal space. It was a simple question on paper, but it touched a nerve that had already been exposed backstage. Harry paused for a second, and the silence said more than his answer ever could. When he finally spoke, his tone was different. It was sharper and more guarded. He said that the question was unfair, and that he was tired of being painted as someone who did not understand his own life. The room felt the shift right away. The warmth that usually fills a late-night interview was gone. Jimmy tried to smile through it, but it looked strained. He tried to soften the moment by saying he was only asking what people at home were wondering, but that did not help. Harry's reply came out quick and tense. He said he was tired of people twisting his words and that he was not here to be mocked. The audience reacted with a wave of uneasy laughter. It was the kind of laugh people use when they want to break the tension but have no idea if they are making things worse. A few people clapped lightly, hoping Harry would loosen up. He did not. He stayed still with a tight jaw, and the space between him and Jimmy felt wider than ever. Jimmy sensed the problem and tried to regain control. He lifted his hands slightly, almost in a calming gesture, and said that the show was all about fun. He tried to redirect the conversation to a safer topic, but Harry cut in again. His voice was louder this time. He said that it did not feel like fun. He said it felt like another setup. The room went quiet. No one in the audience moved. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. Inside the control booth, producers panicked. They started talking over each other through the headsets. One person suggested cutting to commercial early. Another said to stay with it because the moment might calm down. Someone else warned that the interview was close to derailing live on air. They watched every facial expression and every breath, trying to decide what to do next. On stage, Jimmy kept trying to pull things back from the edge, but it was too late. Harry's mood had changed entirely. The awkward tension had turned into something heavier, and everyone in the room could feel that the interview was slipping out of control. The night had just crossed a line and there was no going back. Harry cut Jimmy off before he could finish his next sentence. The interruption was sharp enough to jolt the room. Harry leaned forward in his chair and said that he was tired of what he called American late-night culture. He said it treated real people like entertainment pieces and acted shocked when those people pushed back. His voice carried a mix of anger and exhaustion, and every person in the studio felt the heat behind his words. Jimmy tried to respond calmly, but he was not going to let a guest take over his own show. He held up his hand slightly and told Harry that the interview was meant to be a conversation, not a lecture. Harry shot back that conversations go both ways, and that he was done pretending to laugh at jokes that chipped away at him. The tone was no longer tense. It was openly hostile. Jimmy sat up straighter, and his smile faded into a serious look. He said that guests come on the show with the understanding that humor is part of the deal, and that no one was trying to attack him. The atmosphere shifted in seconds. You could almost feel the air go cold. Half the audience stayed silent, unsure how to react. The other half reacted in two very different ways. Some people cheered because they loved seeing raw conflict. Others booed because they felt Harry was being disrespectful. The mix of noise created a strange echo across the studio that made the moment feel even more unstable. Harry kept going. He said he was tired of being turned into a punchline. He said that he came on the show to talk about his work, not to be tossed into jokes that he had already asked them to remove. Each sentence came out faster than the last, like he had been holding these thoughts inside all night. Jimmy tried to step in again, but Harry talked right over him. At that point, it felt less like an interview and more like two people arguing in front of millions of viewers. Jimmy finally pushed back with real force in his voice. He told Harry that every guest is treated the same way, and that no one gets to rewrite the entire tone of the show because they are in a bad mood. The crowd reacted again, some supporting Jimmy and others shouting for him to let Harry speak. The room was supposed to feel fun and bright, but now it felt like a storm had rolled in and settled on the stage. Behind the cameras, security began to shift their positions. They moved slowly and quietly, staying just out of frame, but anyone paying attention could see them inching closer. Their presence alone made the tension even sharper. It signaled that the moment was no longer just uncomfortable. It was becoming unpredictable. Harry pointed toward the audience as he spoke, and the frustration in his voice kept building. Jimmy looked toward the control booth, almost asking if they were cutting to commercial, but the producers were frozen. No one wanted to make the wrong move. The meltdown was happening live, and there was no clean way out. What started as awkward banter had turned into a full clash of personalities. The studio felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see if either of them would step back or if the night was about to break open even further. The moment the show cut to commercial, the room exploded into noise. Viewers at home saw a clean fade to black, but inside the studio the scene looked nothing like a normal break. Harry stood up from his chair before anyone could speak to him. He looked angry and shaken, and his voice carried across the stage as he demanded respect. He said he was tired of being pushed into situations that made him look foolish, and he refused to sit back down until someone acknowledged it. Jimmy stayed in his chair at first, trying not to escalate the situation even more. He looked up at Harry and told him that this was not how the show works. He said that standing up and shouting at the host would not fix anything, and that the team had tried to follow his requests. Jimmy's tone was firm but not loud. It sounded like someone trying to hold on to authority in a room that was slipping away from him. Harry took that as another slight. He said the show had crossed a line with the questions and the jokes. He kept pointing toward the writers behind the cameras, saying they did not listen to him. Senior producers rushed onto the stage within seconds. They walked between the two men, speaking quickly and quietly, trying to bring the temperature down. One producer asked Harry to move to the side of the stage so they could talk in private. He refused. He said everything needed to be said out in the open. Another producer tried to calm Jimmy, telling him they could rework the next segment if needed, but Jimmy shook his head and said that the guest had to meet the show halfway. The studio audience had been told to stay in their seats during the commercial break, but most of them were whispering and turning in every direction, trying to understand what was happening. A few people clapped for Harry. Others called out for Jimmy. The mix of noise made the atmosphere even harder to control. Camera operators backed away from the stage because they were not sure how close to get. The crew in the booth kept shouting over each other, trying to figure out whether they could still salvage the rest of the show. The producers realized they were running out of time and options. They had a guest who would not calm down, a host who had reached his limit, and an audience watching a conflict that looked like it could turn into something worse if they pushed even a little more. At that point, safety and control mattered more than finishing a segment. That is when the head producer stepped in and made the call to shut the interview down completely. They told Jimmy they were cutting the segment for the rest of the night. They told Harry that the interview was over and that they would escort him out quietly. No one wanted to risk the situation turning into a bigger scene on camera. The decision was quick and final, because the room had reached a point where continuing was no longer possible. What the viewers saw at home looked like a normal commercial break, but the real story was happening in chaos behind the scenes. The studio felt tense the moment the argument crossed a line. Harry stayed planted in his seat even after the producers signaled for a wrap. He stared straight at Jimmy with a stubborn look that said he was not ready to let anything go. The crew kept waiting for him to shift or stand, but he did not move an inch. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy because everyone knows it is about to break. A floor manager stepped in first. He tried to whisper instructions, but Harry brushed him off without looking. Another staff member stepped closer from the side, hoping to calm him down, but Harry kept raising his voice about respect and boundaries. At that point Jimmy looked caught. He tried to lighten the air with a joke, but nothing landed. The crowd could sense the discomfort, and the room lost all the easy energy it had at the start. When Harry leaned forward in frustration, 2 security guards began walking in from the wings. They did not rush, but they moved with purpose. The audience saw them appear, and a soft wave of gasps spread through the seats. People realized this was not part of the show. It was not scripted or playful. It was a real shutdown. The guards positioned themselves on each side of Harry. They asked him to stand, but he stayed stiff in his chair. He kept talking over them, insisting he had a right to finish what he started. One guard placed a hand on the back of the chair, steady but firm. The other guard kept repeating the same line, asking Harry to stand so they could escort him out. The second request came louder. The third request became an instruction. The moment Harry finally stood up, the room shifted again. The audience watched with wide eyes as he tried to continue arguing while walking toward the exit. One guard stayed close behind him, guiding him without force but with clear authority. The other guard walked beside him to block his path back to the stage. Harry kept looking over his shoulder as if he wanted to return to finish the argument. The crew stayed frozen until he disappeared into the hallway. Jimmy remained at his desk, but his expression said everything. He looked frustrated, shocked, and a little embarrassed. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it because he had nothing clean to say to a live audience. His fingers tapped on the desk like he was trying to regain balance. For a moment it was just silence and the sound of a few people shifting in their seats. The network made the decision for him. A producer shouted for an immediate commercial break. The stage lights dimmed faster than usual. The house band cut in late, which made the moment feel even more chaotic. Jimmy stood up and walked off stage the second the cameras faded. No one tried to play it off as comedy. Everyone on the staff understood why the break had been forced. The situation had crossed the line of live television control, and once security stepped in, the only priority became ending the moment as quickly and cleanly as possible. The audience sat with the shock of what they had just seen. Some whispered. Some recorded the aftermath. Everyone knew this was not the kind of chaos a network wants the world to see. The aftermath of the chaotic interview spread faster than anyone expected. Clips of Harry's confrontation and eventual exit went viral within minutes. Social media exploded with reactions. Some viewers defended him, praising his courage to speak his mind. Others mocked him, sharing memes and clips with captions that questioned his composure. The hashtags trended almost instantly, and news outlets began picking up the story while the show was still on air. Jimmy's team moved quickly to release a neutral statement. They emphasized that the show always welcomes guests to speak freely, but that the goal is a conversation, not conflict. They thanked the audience for staying calm and assured viewers that the remainder of the show would continue as planned. The statement tried to walk the line between defending the host and not escalating the drama, but the chaos had already taken on a life of its own. Harry's spokesperson fired back with their own statement. They said that the show had been disrespectful and that Harry had been trying to address serious issues in a setting that did not allow for meaningful conversation. The statement suggested that the interview's abrupt end was not Harry's fault, and it painted the incident as a symptom of larger misunderstandings between him and the media. The comment fueled the debate even more, with journalists and fans dissecting every word. Analysts and commentators quickly weighed in. They criticized Harry's behavior, saying it was unprofessional and unpredictable. They noted that no matter the context, walking off and creating such a public scene was damaging. At the same time, some pundits argued that Jimmy could have handled the situation differently, even if the host remained in control. In the end, no one came out completely unscathed. Jimmy's show had a rating spike, but his control over the narrative looked shaky. Harry's image took a hit for the public meltdown, and the producers faced questions about booking high-risk guests. The clash left reputations bruised and conversations buzzing. Everyone involved had lost something, and the story would dominate headlines for days. The fallout from last night's confrontation will follow Harry for a long time. The public meltdown damaged his reputation, and clips of his angry exit are already embedded in the cultural memory. People will remember not the reasons he came on the show, but the chaos that unfolded in front of millions. Even supporters who understood his perspective now have to reconcile it with the very public loss of control. Jimmy walked away with lessons as well. He showed that he could maintain authority under pressure, but the segment exposed how quickly live television can spin out of control. Even a seasoned host must be prepared for guests who are volatile, and last night proved that no matter how carefully a show is planned, unpredictability is always a factor. Jimmy's team will likely rethink booking strategies and have clearer protocols for high-risk interviews. Hollywood also took notice. The incident is a reminder that star power does not automatically guarantee cooperation. Even royalty with a global platform can clash with the format of American talk shows. Studios, networks, and PR teams now have a cautionary tale about balancing celebrity image with the realities of live television. High-profile interviews come with the risk of spectacle overtaking substance, and everyone in the industry will be studying this one closely. Ultimately, the story is more than just a messy moment on television. It is a reminder that public figures are human, and that the pressures of performance can trigger real conflict. It shows the tension between personality, expectation, and public perception. No one walks away completely unscathed, and the ripples from one heated exchange can echo far beyond the stage. If you have been watching this story unfold, do not miss what comes next. Hit the subscribe button now so you stay updated on every development. This is the kind of drama and insight that you cannot afford to miss, and the next chapter is just around the corner. The confrontation between Harry and Jimmy Kimmel was nothing short of explosive. What started as a high-profile interview quickly spiraled into a tense showdown that left the studio in chaos. Harry's frustration boiled over on live television, and his exit made headlines around the world. Jimmy managed to hold the stage, but the night revealed just how unpredictable live TV can be when emotions run high and egos collide. Both men walked away with bruised reputations, and the audience at home witnessed a moment that will be replayed for years. The blunt reality is that Harry mishandled the situation. His refusal to follow the show's flow, his constant interruptions, and the dramatic exit painted a picture of someone overwhelmed by the pressures of public scrutiny. Jimmy may have been sharp and persistent, but he remained in control. This incident will follow Harry for a long time, and it serves as a warning for any guest who underestimates the structure and expectations of American talk shows. Fame and titles do not automatically guarantee grace under pressure. If you want to keep up with stories like this, do not wait another second. Hit that subscribe button now. Stay ahead of the drama, see the full breakdowns, and never miss a moment when celebrities collide on live television. The next story we will dissect involves another explosive celebrity confrontation that you are going to want to see. Subscribe now so you are first in line for the chaos, the insights, and the unfiltered truth. This is the kind of content you cannot afford to miss, and the next breakdown is coming very soon.